Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and today we're doing more Albert Einstein. Ideas and Opinions by Albert Einstein. We're going to read three short pieces today, so let's jump into this. First one we're going to read is called Teachers and Pupils. And the blurb on it says, "A talk to a group of children," and it was published in Mein Weltbild, Amsterdam, Querido Verlag, 1934. My dear children, I rejoice to see you before me today. Happy youth of a sunny and fortunate land. Bear in mind that the wonderful things you learn in your schools are the work of many generations, produced by enthusiastic effort and infinite labor in every country of the world. All this is put in your hands as your inheritance in order that you may receive it, honor it, add to it, and one day faithfully hand it to your children. Thus do we mortals achieve immortality in the permanent things which we create in common. If you always keep that in mind, you will find a meaning in life and work and acquire the right attitude toward other nations and ages. That was all in that. It was just a real short piece. Einstein talking about continuing to learn and add upon the knowledge that you've already achieved so that each generation is better than the next. And it helps attain a bit of immortality for simply because of knowing that knowledge. I mean, Einstein's been dead for how long now? Since the 1960s or something? But yeah, still well known. John F. Kennedy, still well known. Uh, other Isaac Newton, still well known. Knowledge can help, and continuing to learn it and add upon it can help establish immortality in our world. Next piece I'm reading is called Education and Educators. And the blurb says, "A letter to a young girl," published in Mein Weltbild, Amsterdam, Querido Verlag, 1934. I have read about 16 pages of your manuscript and it made me smile. It is clever, well observed, honest. It stands on its own feet up to a point, and yet it is so typically feminine, by which I mean derivative and steeped in personal resentment. I suffered at the hands of my teachers a similar treatment. They disliked me for my independence and passed me over when they wanted assistance. I must admit, though, that I was somewhat less of a model student than you. But it would not have been worth my while to write anything about my school life, and still less would I have liked to be responsible for anyone's printing or actually reading it. Besides, one always cuts a poor figure if one complains about others who are struggling for their place in the sun, too, after their own fashion. Therefore, pocket your temperament and keep your manuscript for your sons and daughters, in order that they may derive consolation from it and not give a damn for what their teachers tell them or think of them. Incidentally, I am only coming to Princeton to do research, not to teach. There is too much education altogether, especially in American schools. The only rational way of educating is to be an example, if one can't help it, a warning example. But yeah, um, he is talking to this girl about her manuscript, and he says it's very intelligent, very well written, although I think the influence that has been foisted upon you to be this kind of person since you are a girl is not right. You should do what's, the best overall and not have to force yourself to look at it from the viewpoint of, oh, I must be very feminine, type of girl, blah, blah, blah. And that's what Einstein's kind of saying. Don't feel you have to conform to what they tell you. Be you. So, last piece we're going to read is called Education and World Peace. And the blurb says, a message to the Progressive Education Association, November the 23rd, 1934. The United States, because of its geographic location, is in the fortunate position of being able to teach sane pacifism in the schools, for there exists no serious danger of foreign aggression, and once there is no necessity for inculcating in youth a military spirit. There is, however, a danger that the problem of educating for peace only may be handled from an emotional rather than a realistic standpoint. Little will be gained without a thorough understanding of the underlying difficulties of the problem. American youth should understand, first of all, that even though actual invasion of American territory is unlikely, the United States is liable to be involved in international entanglements at any time. Reference need only be made to American participation in the World War to prove the need for such understanding. Security for the United States, as for other countries, lies only in a satisfactory solution of the world peace problem. Youth must not be allowed to believe that safety can be obtained through political isolation. On the contrary, a serious concern for the general peace problem should be aroused, especially should young people be brought to a clear understanding of how great a responsibility American politicians assumed in failing to support Woodrow Wilson's liberal plans at the conclusion of the World War and afterward, hereby hampering the work of the League of Nations in the solution of this problem. It should be pointed out that nothing can be gained merely by demanding disarmament, so long as there are powerful countries not unwilling to use militaristic methods for the attainment of more advantageous world positions. However, the justification of such proposals as those supported by France, for example, to safeguard individual countries through the establishment of international institutions should be explained. In order to obtain this security, internal international treaties are needed for common defense against an aggressor. These treaties are necessary, but are not in themselves sufficient. One more step should be taken. Military means of defense should be internalized, merging and exchanging forces on such a broad scale that military forces stationed in any one country are not without are not withheld for that country's exclusive goals. In preparation for such steps as these, youth must understand the importance of the problem. The spirit of international solidarity should also be strengthened, and chauvinism should be combated as a hindrance to world peace. In the schools, history should be used as a means of interpreting progress in civilization and not for inculcating ideas of imperialistic power and military success. In my opinion, H. G. Wells' World History is to be recommended to students for this point of view. Finally, it is at least of indirect importance that in geography as well as in history, a sympathetic understanding of the characteristics of various people be and be stimulated. And this understanding should include those peoples commonly designated as primitive or backward. So yeah, Einstein talking about how the US's isolation will not guarantee them peace. And we do see this. He mentions in World War I that the refusal to help Woodrow Wilson develop the League of Nations or adopt the League of Nations for the U.S. ends up in its failing. It's adopted in other countries around the world, but it does fail. And what the League of Nations were is after the First World War, many nations felt there should be a union of a lot of these nations together. Woodrow Wilson helped draft the League of Nations, but he couldn't get the U.S. to join. But it became the precursor of what would be created as the United Nations. after World War II. Who knows if the League of Nations might have been able to stop that Second World War. But yeah, um, World War One ended in 1918. Um, oh, and this was from 1934. This particular piece by Einstein. So it was in between the end of the First World War and probably the felling of the League of Nations and the Second World War, which takes place in 1940, with the U.S. joining in December of 1941. So yeah, he's making the point we need to come together as a peoples, no matter who and where we are. Though there are many who would think a united front is a bad idea, Donald Trump. Other nations have not paid their fair share. I'm glad that idiot's going to be gone. But the biggest, well, let's not get into the politics right now. Anyway, that'll be it for now. As always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tries to tell you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, later.